Imagine this for a second. What happens when the group that has been told for half a century that they are toxic, unnecessary, and the root of all problems suddenly takes that message completely to heart and quietly removes themselves from the equation? What happens when the people who are expected to keep building, keep providing, keep protecting, and keep pursuing simply stop? Not out of anger anymore, but out of perfect, calm indifference. Stay with me until the very end because by the time this video is over, you are going to see exactly where this road is leading. And I promise you, the final picture is going to hit harder than anything you have heard on this topic before. If you want more raw, unfiltered, angry guy breakdowns like this one, smash that like button right now. Share this video with every man you know who needs to hear it, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss an upload. And listen, if you are serious about protecting everything you work for in this collapsing economy and you want to learn how to actually grow real wealth in crypto the right way, head over to Angry's Crypto Academy. The full step-by-step program that teaches you how to buy, sell, trade, and safeguard your assets is linked in the description below. Go check it out right now while it is still on your mind. And if these videos are hitting home for you and you want to keep the angry guy fueled up and making more of them, you can buy me a Red Bull through the link in the description. Every can keeps the fire coming. Let us get into it. For the last 50 plus years, we have watched a very specific story play out in slow motion. It started with promises of equality, of liberation, of breaking chains that supposedly held women back. Fair enough, nobody reasonable was ever against real fairness. But somewhere along the line, the message shifted. It stopped being about opportunity and started being about punishment. It stopped being about lifting one group up and started being about tearing another group down. Men went from partners to be worked with, to problems to be solved, to predators to be contained, to relics to be phased out entirely. And the craziest part is that the people delivering this message never once stopped to ask what would happen if the men they were talking about actually believed them and acted on it. Think about the timeline for a moment. We were told that traditional masculinity was toxic. We were told that men taking up space, literally sitting with their legs apart on a train, was an act of aggression that needed its own special shame word, manspreading. We were told that noticing an attractive woman in public was creepy, that approaching her was harassment, that offering to buy her a drink was entitlement, that expecting basic reciprocity in dating was misogyny. We were told that men speaking too loudly, too confidently, or too directly were mansplaining. We were told that little boys running around and playing rough needed to be medicated and re educated because their natural energy was some kind of disorder. We were told over and over and over again that men as they naturally exist were the problem. And then the institutions doubled down. Family courts turned into wealth extraction machines where a man could lose his children, his home, his savings, and half his future income simply because a relationship ended. False accusations became weapons that could destroy a career overnight with zero evidence required. Social media gave every disgruntled person a megaphone and an audience hungry for public executions. Hashtags became modern day witch trials. A single tweet could end a life before breakfast. Meanwhile, every traditional male role was mocked or regulated out of existence. Protector? That is patriarchal. Provider? That is oppressive. Leader? That is domineering. Even basic politeness, holding a door, offering a seat, walking on the outside of the sidewalk, got relabeled as sexist condescension. Men were told in 1,000 different ways every single day that their presence, their instincts, their very existence in the vicinity of women was unwanted and dangerous. And here's the part nobody saw coming. Men listened, not all at once, not in some organized march or big dramatic announcement, just quietly, individually, one by one, men started taking the message at face value. If everything we do is wrong, if every natural impulse we have is toxic, If simply existing around women makes us the villain, then the logical move is to remove ourselves from the equation entirely. And that is exactly what happened. Men stopped approaching, cold approaches in bars, daytime conversations in coffee shops, sliding into DMs. All of it started drying up. Dating app usage from men collapsed. Marriage rates fell off a cliff. Birth rates followed. Men stopped signing up for the roles that required them to sacrifice everything for people who had made it crystal clear they were not wanted or appreciated. And the most important part, they did not do it with anger, they did it with relief. Because here is the secret nobody talks about. When men finally let go of the expectation that they have to chase, provide, perform, and pursue validation from people who openly despise them, something incredible happens. Peace. Real, deep, unshakable peace. The kind of peace most men have never felt in their adult lives because they have always been told that their value comes from what they can do for others, especially for women. Suddenly, the money that used to disappear on dates with no reciprocation that stays in their accounts. The time that used to be spent crafting the perfect text message gets invested in the gym, in skills, in businesses, in friendships with other men who actually have their backs. The mental energy that used to be drained by constant criticism and walking on eggshells gets redirected into building something real. Men discovered that solitude is not the same thing as loneliness. In fact, for the first time in decades, millions of men woke up and realized they were happier alone than they ever were in relationships. And women noticed. At first, it was confusion. Where did all the good men go? Why are men not approaching anymore? Then it turned into frustration. Men are cowards. Men are afraid of strong women. Men cannot handle equality. Then the frustration turned into panic as the reality started to sink in. Rents did not get cheaper. Groceries did not stop going up. Student loans did not pause. The economy did not care that women had been told they did not need men. Bills still came due every single month, and suddenly there was nobody expected to help carry them. TikTok started filling up with videos of women in their late 20s and 30s asking the same question in 100 different ways. Where are all the men? Why won't anyone commit? Why is dating so hard now? Some of them sounded confused. Some of them sounded entitled. A lot of them sounded scared. And the wildest part is that in almost every single one of those videos, you can hear the same unspoken realization creeping in. They finally understand on some level that the thing they spent years celebrating, men being pushed out, men being shamed, men being told they were obsolete, actually happened. And now they are living with the consequences. But here is what separates the men who walked away from the boys who are still hoping for scraps. The men who walked away are not coming back. Not because they hate women, not because they are hiding in basements playing video games all day like the media wants you to believe, but because they finally saw the game for what it was and decided it was not worth playing anymore. They saw that modern dating had become a system where men were expected to risk rejection, financial loss, false accusations, and social humiliation for the privilege of maybe, possibly, if everything aligned perfectly, getting some basic affection in return. They saw that marriage had become the worst financial contract a man could ever sign. They saw that fatherhood now came with the very real possibility of being erased from your children's lives on a whim. They saw all of it, and instead of complaining, they simply opted out. And in the vacuum they left behind, something beautiful started happening for men. Minimalism became natural. The average guy does not need much to be happy. A safe place to sleep, good food, a gym membership, a couple close friends, some hobbies, and peace of mind. That is luxury to most men. When you remove the constant drain of trying to impress people who cannot be impressed, trying to provide for people who claim they do not need providing for, trying to protect people who say they do not want protection, what you are left with is surplus money. surplus time, surplus energy, surplus peace. Men started cooking their own meals and realizing they actually enjoy it. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. They started lifting weights and watching their bodies transform. They started businesses, they traveled, they built communities with other men who were on the same path. They rediscovered hobbies they had abandoned decades ago because they were too busy chasing validation. They slept better, they smiled more. They stopped walking around with that low level anxiety that comes from knowing that at any moment something you say or do could be twisted into proof that you are a monster. And the best part, they did not have to announce it. They did not need a movement or a hashtag or a marching permit. They just quietly removed themselves from systems that hated them and built something better on the sidelines. Meanwhile, the world they left behind started showing the cracks almost immediately. Birth rates in most Western countries are now below replacement levels and still falling. Marriage rates are at all time lows. Single motherhood is skyrocketing, and with it, childhood poverty. The economy is shrinking because there are not enough young workers to replace the retiring population. Housing prices keep climbing because nobody is forming households anymore. The dating apps that once bragged about billions of swipes are now ghost towns on the male side. Entire industries that depended on male disposable income, restaurants, nightlife, luxury retail, are starting to feel the pinch. And still, the message from the top has not changed. Men are still the problem. Men are still toxic. Men are still the ones who need to fix themselves. The irony would be hilarious if it was not so tragic. But here is where the story gets really interesting. And this is the part I promised you would want to stick around for. The men who walked away are not angry anymore. That is what makes this moment so powerful. Anger would mean they still cared. Anger would mean there was still a chance to pull them back into the fight. But the men who have truly walked away have moved past anger into something much more dangerous for the old system: complete and total indifference. They do not hate women. They do not wish women harm. They simply do not care what happens next. They have their peace. They have their freedom. They have their health and their wealth and their brotherhood and their purpose. And from where they are sitting, watching the world burn itself down, trying to figure out how to function without the group it spent 50 years telling it did not need, is not their problem anymore. That is the part that keeps me up at night. Not because I am worried about men, men are doing better than they have in decades, but because I can see the freight train coming for everyone else, and nobody in charge seems willing to pull the emergency brake. The system spent half a century teaching men that they were worthless unless they were serving someone else. And now that men have finally accepted that teaching and decided to serve only themselves, the system is shocked to discover it actually needed them after all. And the clock is ticking. We are already seeing the first waves of panic, articles asking where all the men went, podcasts dedicated to figuring out why men have stopped caring, politicians starting to float ideas about taxing single men to subsidize single mothers, dating coaches making millions teaching women how to trick men into coming back, influencers telling women to hide their craziness for the first 3 months if they want to lock a guy down. The coping mechanisms are endless, but the one thing nobody is willing to say out loud is the truth. You told men you did not need them. You told men you did not want them as they are. You told men their natural instincts were dangerous and wrong. And now that they have finally believed you and built lives that do not include you, you are shocked to discover that maybe, just maybe, you were wrong. But it is too late. The men who walked away are not hiding. They are not broken. They are not lost. They are right there, living better lives than most people ever will. And they are not coming back. Not for begging, not for shaming, not for promises of change. Not for anything. Because for the first time in their lives, they have something more valuable than female approval. They have peace. And once a man finds real peace, there is nothing you can offer him that is worth giving it up. Now, let us go deeper because this is not just about dating apps being quiet or marriage rates dropping. This is about the complete rewiring of an entire civilization that spent 50 years sawing off the branch it was sitting on and is now shocked to feel gravity doing its thing. Picture the average man 10 years ago. Wake up at 6, fight traffic, sit in a cubicle for 9 hours doing something he probably does not care about, just so he can hand over half his check to taxes and the other half to rent or a mortgage that is mostly going to a woman who has already decided he is disposable. Then after work, he's supposed to hit the gym to stay attractive enough that maybe one day a woman will give him 15 minutes of lukewarm attention on a Saturday night, provided he spends $200 on dinner and pretends to care about her coworker's drama. On the weekends, he is either recovering from the week or trying to keep up with the endless list of honeydew tasks that somehow never make anyone happier. That was the deal. That was the script every man was handed at 18 and told was the only path to being a real man. And for a long time, most men played along. They swallowed the complaints, they absorbed the criticism, they paid for the therapy that told them their natural desires were the problem. They signed the prenups that were not prenups. They showed up to the jobs they hated. They kept the economy spinning. They kept the streets safe. They kept the lights on. And in return, they were told every single day in 1,000 different ways that they were the cause of every problem in the world and that the world would be better off without them. So when men started disappearing from that script, a lot of people assumed it would be loud. They expected protests, they expected rage, they expected some kind of pushback. But the disappearance has been the quietest revolution in human history. No banners, no manifestos, no leaders, no demands, just millions of individual men waking up one morning and saying quietly to themselves, I'm done. And then they simply stop showing up to the roles that hated them. They stopped showing up to the expensive first dates where the woman already decided before the appetizer that he was not tall enough, rich enough, or exciting enough. They stopped showing up to the relationships where every disagreement ended with, you just don't get it because you're a man. They stopped showing up to the weddings where the groom's vows are treated as a joke and the bride's vows are treated as a TED talk. They stopped showing up to the family court dates that were already decided before they walked in the door. They just stopped. And in the space they left behind, nature is doing what nature always does when you remove a major stabilizing force: chaos. Not dramatic, movie style chaos with explosions and screaming, just slow, grinding, boring chaos. The kind where rent keeps going up but wages stay flat. The kind where the grocery store keeps moving the goalpost on what affordable means. The kind where a single income used to buy a house and raise a family and now cannot even cover a one-bedroom apartment and ramen noodles. The kind where women who were told they could have it all are now discovering that having it all alone is actually just having a lot of bills and no help. And the coping is fascinating to watch. First, it was denial. Men are just intimidated by strong women. Then it was bargaining. Okay, maybe we went too far with the man hating stuff, but if men would just man up and come back, everything would be fine. Then it was anger. How dare men abandon women like this? Men are selfish. Men are cowards. Men are the problem all over again. And now we are entering the depression stage. Thousands of videos every week of women staring into their ring lights with that hollow look, asking nobody in particular why everything is so hard now. They post their dating app screenshots showing 0 matches and caption it, "Where did all the good men go?" As if the good men simply vanished into thin air instead of making a rational decision based on 50 years of observable evidence. But the part that almost nobody is willing to say out loud is this: the men did not disappear. They are right there. You can find them in the gym at 9 p.m. on a Friday night when they used to be out buying drinks for women who would never remember their names. You can find them in the coffee shops on Sunday morning, reading books, or working on their businesses instead of recovering from another hangover of rejection. You can find them in their apartments that are paid off early because they never had to finance someone else's lifestyle. You can find them hiking, fishing, building, creating, lifting, learning, traveling, laughing with their real friends, sleeping 8 hours a night, eating steak they cook themselves, and waking up every single day without the low level dread that used to be their constant companion. They are not hiding. They are just no longer performing for an audience that spent decades booing them off the stage. And the longer this goes on, the more the gap widens. Because every day a man spends living for himself instead of living for approval is another day he levels up in ways the old system never allowed. His bank account grows, his body gets stronger, his mind gets sharper, his circle gets tighter and more loyal, his peace gets deeper. And every day a woman spends waiting for the men to come back is another day she falls further behind in a world that is not getting any cheaper or any kinder. I want you to really think about the math here because the numbers do not lie. In the United States right now, women own the majority of the college degrees. They dominate the HR departments that control hiring. They are the majority of voters. They control the majority of consumer spending. They have preferential treatment in family court. They have entire government agencies dedicated to their interests. And yet the suicide rate for men is still 4 times higher. The homelessness rate for men is still overwhelmingly higher. The workplace death rate for men is still 95%, and men still die 6 years earlier on average. And somehow, after all of that, we are supposed to believe that men walking away is the real crisis. No. The crisis is that the system spent half a century telling men they were the problem, and now that men have finally agreed and removed themselves from the problem, the system is collapsing under its own weight. And here is the part that should terrify anyone who still thinks this is just about dating. This is not about dating anymore. This is about the complete breakdown of the social contract that kept civilization running for thousands of years. For all of recorded history, men and women had a deal. It was never perfect, it was never equal in the modern sense, but it was functional. Men handled the dangerous, dirty, difficult jobs that kept society running. Women handled the home and the children that kept society continuing. Both sides had leverage. Both sides had incentives to cooperate. Both sides understood that the other brought something essential to the table. Then we spent 50 years telling one side they were obsolete, oppressive, and evil for fulfilling their half of the deal, while simultaneously telling the other side they no longer needed to bring anything to the table except their presence. And now we are shocked that the deal is off. Because here is the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Women need men more than men need women in the modern world, not emotionally, not romantically, not in some abstract sense, literally, physically, structurally. The entire system we live in was built by men, maintained by men, and defended by men. The electricity that powers the ring light you record your crying videos with was installed by men. The building you live in was designed and constructed by men. The food you eat was grown, transported, and stocked by men. The police and fire and military that keep you safe are overwhelmingly men. The infrastructure that makes modern life possible is 90 plus percent male labor. And for 50 years, we told those men that doing all of that made them toxic, that wanting appreciation for it made them entitled, that expecting any kind of reciprocity made them misogynists. And now that they have finally taken us at our word and stopped doing it for free, we are discovering just how expensive it is to pay someone else to do the things men used to do out of duty and love. That is the real red pill here. It was never about sex. It was never even about relationships. It was about who was going to keep the lights on when the people who used to do it for love and family and legacy finally decided they were done being taken for granted. And the answer is turning out to be nobody, because the men who walked away are not going on strike in the traditional sense. They are still working, they are still paying taxes, they are still keeping the parts of the system running that directly benefit them. But they are no longer volunteering for the extra shifts. They are no longer taking the dangerous jobs out of a sense of duty. They are no longer starting families that will require them to work themselves into early graves. They are no longer sacrificing their health, their freedom, and their peace for people who spent decades telling them their sacrifice was the bare minimum. They are just living their lives. And that quiet refusal is more powerful than any protest could ever be. Because you cannot shame a man who no longer cares what you think of him. You cannot guilt a man who no longer feels responsible for your happiness. You cannot threaten a man who has already accepted the worst case scenario and discovered he prefers it to the old deal. That is the new reality. The men are not coming back, not because they cannot, but because they do not want to. And every day that passes makes it easier for them to stay gone, because every day they spend free is another day they level up while the system that rejected them falls further behind. And the craziest part is that most of them are not even talking about it. They are not making YouTube channels about how much better life is now. They are not posting before and after pictures of their bank accounts and their peace of mind. They are just living it quietly, happily, finally, while the world they left behind gets louder and louder, trying to figure out why everything is falling apart. That is the story we are living through right now. Not the end of men, the end of the old deal, the end of the era where men were expected to set themselves on fire to keep others warm while being told their smoke was toxic. And the beginning of something new, something quieter, something stronger. It's something that cannot be negotiated with, cannot be shamed, cannot be guilted, and cannot be stopped. Because once a man finds peace, real peace, the kind that comes from knowing he is no longer anyone's ATM therapist punching bag or plan B, there is no offer in the world big enough to make him trade it away. And that is where we are headed. Now, let us pull the lens back even further and look at what happens to an entire society when the people who used to carry the heaviest loads decide that carrying those loads is no longer worth the price being asked. Because we are not just talking about lonely Fridays and empty dating apps anymore. We are talking about the slow motion collapse of the basic operating system that has kept Western civilization functioning for centuries. Start with the numbers, because numbers do not have feelings and they do not care about narratives. In the United States, the fertility rate is now 1.62 births per woman. Replacement level is 2.1. That means every generation going forward is going to be roughly 25% smaller than the one before it, assuming nothing changes. But things are changing, and they are changing faster every year. In South Korea, which is the canary in this particular coal mine, the fertility rate is 0.72. That is not a typo. 0.72. That means in one generation, the population will be cut nearly in half. And in 2 generations, it will be cut to a quarter. Japan is already there. Italy, Spain, Greece, Portugal, all of Europe is sliding down the same slope. And every single one of these countries has spent the last 40 to 60 years telling men the exact same things we have been told here. This is not coincidence. This is cause and effect playing out on a civilizational scale. When men walk away from marriage and fatherhood, the birth rate does not just dip, it craters. And when the birth rate craters, everything else starts to break in sequence. Fewer babies today means fewer workers in 25 years. Fewer workers means a shrinking economy. A shrinking economy means fewer tax dollars. Fewer tax dollars means pensions and social security systems collapse. Collapsing pensions mean old people who spent their lives paying into a system suddenly have no safety net. And when old people have no safety net, they become desperate. And desperate societies do desperate things. We are already seeing the first dominoes fall. Japan has more adult diapers sold every year than baby diapers. Entire villages are being abandoned because there are not enough young people to maintain them. South Korea is shutting down schools by the hundreds because there are no children to fill them. In Italy, the government is now paying people to move to dying towns just to keep the lights on. These are not future predictions. These are current events in countries that took the same ideological path we are on and simply got there a decade or two earlier. And the response from the people in charge is always the same: more immigration. Bring in millions of people from cultures that have not been taught to hate themselves yet and hope they keep the system afloat a little longer. But that only works until the new arrivals figure out the same math that the native men already figured out. In Germany, second generation immigrant birth rates are already dropping. In Sweden, the same. In the UK, the same. The pattern repeats everywhere the message spreads. Men are the problem. Masculinity is toxic. Sacrifice is entitlement. And family is oppression. So the system keeps importing new men to replace the ones who walked away, only to discover that the new men learn the rules fast and start walking away too. And every year the hole gets deeper. But the economic collapse is only half the story. The other half is the complete breakdown of social cohesion. When men stop forming families, they stop having skin in the game. They stop caring about the long term health of the society because they no longer have children who will inherit whatever is left. They stop voting for politicians who promise stable futures because they no longer believe in futures that include them. They stop investing in communities because they no longer see those communities as theirs. They become, for lack of a better term, free agents, loyal to themselves and their immediate circle, and indifferent to everything else. And that indifference is lethal to a society that depends on male buy in to function. Think about every major public works project in history: the pyramids, the Roman aqueducts, the transcontinental railroad, the interstate highway system, the moon landing. Every single one of them was built by men who believed that their sacrifice today would pay off for their children and grandchildren tomorrow. Remove that belief and you remove the willingness to sacrifice. And when you remove the willingness to sacrifice, you remove the ability to build or maintain anything that lasts longer than one generation. We are already seeing it. Infrastructure in the United States is crumbling. Bridges are literally falling down. Water systems in major cities are poisoning people. The power grid fails every summer, and every time something breaks, the response is the same: raise taxes, blame climate change, promise to study the problem. But the men who used to roll up their sleeves and fix things for free because it was the right thing to do for their families and their country are no longer showing up. Because why would they? They have been told for decades that their labor is exploitation, that their pride is toxic, that their desire to leave the world better for their kids is patriarchal oppression. So they stay home. They fix their own stuff. They help their friends. They protect their circle. And they let the rest burn. And the women who spent years celebrating independence are now discovering that independence is expensive. Real independence, not the Instagram version with the wine glass and the girl boss captions. The actual version where nobody is coming to change your tire at 2 in the morning. Nobody is carrying the couch up 3 flights of stairs. Nobody is working overtime to cover the mortgage when the car breaks down. Nobody is standing between you and the consequences of a world that was never designed to be navigated alone. That is the part nobody warned them about. They were sold a fantasy where independence meant freedom without cost, where being strong meant never needing anyone, where having it all meant never having to compromise. And now they are waking up in their mid 30s in a one-bedroom apartment with a cat and a ring light and a stack of bills, and the slowly dawning realization that the fantasy had an expiration date they were never told about. And the men they spent years telling to go away are not laughing. They are not gloating. They are not even paying attention anymore. They are too busy living lives that are simpler, cheaper, healthier, and happier than anything they ever had when they were still trying to play the old game. They are the ones eating ribeyes they grilled themselves while watching the game with friends who actually show up when they say they will. They are the ones sleeping 8 hours a night without worrying about whose feelings they might hurt tomorrow. They are the ones with six-figure investment accounts because they never had to finance someone else's master's degree in gender studies. They are the ones traveling to places they always wanted to see because they do not have to save for private schools they will never use. They are the ones waking up every morning without that knot in their stomach that used to come from knowing that no matter what they did, it would never be enough. That is the new male privilege, peace. And once you have tasted real peace, there is no going back to chaos for the sake of someone else's comfort. That is why the begging videos do not work. That is why the shaming articles do not work. That is why the promises of change do not work. Because the men who walked away are not negotiating with terrorists. They are not terrorists. They are just done being hostages. And the longer this goes on, the more men join them. Every day, another guy gets burned one too many times and decides he is out. Every day, another guy watches his buddy get cleaned out in divorce court and decides marriage is not for him. Every day, another guy sees the writing on the wall and chooses peace over performance. And there is no leader to negotiate with. There is no headquarters to raid. There is no manifesto to debunk. There is just millions of individual men making the same rational decision based on the same observable reality. And that is the most unstoppable force in human history because you cannot force a man to care when he has finally stopped caring. You cannot guilt a man into sacrifice when he has finally accepted that his sacrifice will never be appreciated. You cannot shame a man into returning when he has finally realized that the people doing the shaming never wanted him in the first place. That is the end game. Not violence, not revenge, not even anger, just quiet, calm, permanent withdrawal. And the society that spent 50 years teaching men they were worthless is now discovering exactly how much they were actually worth when they finally take that lesson to heart and act on it. We are living through the greatest shift in human social organization since the Industrial Revolution. And almost nobody is ready for what comes next. But the men who walked away are. They have their health, they have their wealth, they have their brotherhood, they have their peace, and they are not giving any of it back. Not now and not ever. Now let us talk about the timeline because this is not some distant sci-fi dystopia. This is already happening in real time, city by city, country by country, and most people still think it is just a dating problem. Start with the housing market because that is the one that is going to hit the hardest and the fastest. For the last 15 years, we have been told that the reason young people cannot buy homes is because of greedy boomers, corporate landlords, and not enough supply. Those things are factors, but they are symptoms, not the disease. The real disease is household formation collapse. A house is not bought by a single person earning $60,000 a year. A house is bought by two incomes or by one man who is willing to work himself half to death because he has a wife and kids to provide for. Remove the two income traditional household and remove the single male provider who is motivated by family, and suddenly the entire demand side of the housing equation disappears. We are already seeing it in real time. In every major Western city, the number of single men under 40 who are even applying for mortgages has plummeted. Not because they cannot afford the payments, many of them can, but because why would you lock yourself into a 30-year debt sentence for a 3-bedroom house when you do not have a wife, do not have kids, and have zero intention of ever having either? A paid off 1-bedroom condo or a small house in a quiet area is cheaper, easier to maintain, and does not come with the risk of losing it all in a divorce. The result? Entire suburbs built in the 1980s and 1990s for young families are slowly turning into ghost towns. The schools are closing, the parks are empty, the strip malls are shuttered. Drive through any older suburb in America on a Saturday morning and count how many kids you see playing outside. The silence is deafening. And the flip side is happening in the urban cores. Young single women are still moving to the big cities because that is where the jobs are. That is where the nightlife is. That is where the Instagram background is. But the men are not following them anymore. The men who used to move to the city to meet women, to chase careers that would make them attractive, to build lives that required a partner, those men are staying in the smaller towns, working remotely, or just stacking money and living cheaper. The dating market in every major city is now so lopsided that the ratio in places like Manhattan, Washington, D.C., and San Francisco is approaching 2 or 3 college educated women for every one college educated man in the 25 to 39 age range. And the women are starting to feel it, not just in dating, but in rent. Because when the pool of men who are willing to subsidize a woman's lifestyle dries up, the rent does not care about your feelings. A 1-bedroom in Brooklyn that used to be split with a boyfriend who made good money is now $1,200 a month that has to come out of one paycheck. And that paycheck is not growing nearly as fast as the rent. That is why you are seeing the explosion of I make 6 figures and I still can't afford to live videos from women in their late 20s and early 30s. They were never supposed to have to afford it alone. The plan was always to find a man who would carry the heavier financial load while they worked a passion job or went part time after kids. That plan is collapsing in real time, and the math is brutal. Now layer on the coming pension and social security crisis. The average boomer is retiring right now with the expectation that the system they paid into for 40 years will take care of them. That system was designed under the assumption that there would always be 4 to 5 workers paying in for every one retiree taking out. Today, that ratio is barely 3 to 1 and falling fast. By 2035, it will be 2 to 1. By 2040, it will be 1.5 to 1 in many Western countries. Who are those workers supposed to be? The children of the boomers and Gen X. The ones who were never born because men walked away from marriage and fatherhood. The math was never going to work, but nobody wanted to say it out loud because it would require admitting that the sexual revolution and 50 years of telling men they were unnecessary had consequences. Japan is already there. Their pension system is kept afloat only by the Bank of Japan printing money like it is going out of style. The result is a 25% youth poverty rate and elderly people committing minor crimes just to go to prison because prison has free food and healthcare. That is not hyperbole. It is happening right now. Europe is about 5 to 10 years behind Japan. America is about 10 to 15 years behind Japan. But the trajectory is locked in. The only variable is how ugly the landing gets. And the ugliest part is that the people in charge still refuse to admit the root cause. Instead of looking at 50 years of anti male messaging and asking if maybe, just maybe, telling half the population they are expendable was a bad idea, they double down. They propose taxing single men extra. They propose mandatory national service aimed only at men. They propose UBI that is means tested in ways that punish men who earn more. They propose everything except the one thing that would actually fix the problem: treating men like human beings worth keeping around again. Because that would require accountability. That would require admitting that the emperor has been naked for decades. That would require the people who spent their entire careers building empires on male tiaras to say we were wrong. And that is never going to happen. So instead, we get more coping, more articles about how men need to lower their standards, more dating coaches telling women to pretend to be traditional for 90 days to lock a man down and then go back to normal once the ring is on. More politicians promising free everything paid for by money that does not exist because the workers who were supposed to generate that money were never born. And through all of it, the men who walked away just keep walking. They keep building their bodies. They keep stacking their money. They keep deepening their friendships. They keep traveling to places the women crying on TikTok can only dream about. They keep waking up every morning with zero drama, zero demands, zero dread. And every year, the gap between their lives and the lives of the people still plugged into the old system gets wider. That is the part that almost nobody is ready for. This is not a phase. This is not a temper tantrum. This is not something that will reverse when the economy gets better or when women suddenly become nice again. This is a permanent shift in male incentives that, once changed, can never be unchanged. You cannot unsee the matrix once you have seen it. You cannot unlearn female nature once you have watched it play out 1,000 times in real time. You cannot go back to giving your time, money, and life force to a system that spent 50 years proving it hates you. The men who walked away are the first generation in history to grow up with the internet, giving them real time access to the experiences of millions of men who came before them. They watched their fathers get destroyed in divorce court. They watched their older brothers get accused and canceled for nothing. They watched their friends get used up and discarded the second something better came along. And they decided collectively and without coordination that they were not going to be next. And because of that, they are winning. Not in the scoreboard way the old system measured winning, not with the big house and the fancy car and the trophy wife and the 2.5 kids, but in the way that actually matters: happiness, health, wealth, freedom, peace. The average man who has fully embraced walking away today has more real abundance than the average married man with kids had in the 1950s. He has better health because he is not stressed 24/7. He has more money because he is not supporting five people. He has better sex when he wants it because he is not negotiating for it like a beggar. He has deeper friendships because he is not isolated by a woman who hates his friends. He has more purpose because he is building something for himself instead of building something that can be taken away tomorrow. That is the new definition of winning. And it is a definition the old system cannot compete with because the old system only had one carrot to dangle in front of men: access to women and family. Remove that carrot or make it so radioactive that no rational man will reach for it, and the entire control structure collapses. That is where we are right now. The control is gone, the leverage is gone, the social contract is dead, and something new is being born in its place. Something that does not need permission, something that does not ask for approval, something that cannot be shamed, cannot be guilted, and cannot be stopped. The men who walked away are not the end of masculinity. They are the beginning of a new kind of masculinity, one that is not for sale and one that is not negotiable, one that exists for its own sake. And that more than anything else is what terrifies the old system the most. Because for the first time in thousands of years, men are free, really free. And freedom, once tasted, is the one thing no system in history has ever figured out how to put back in the bottle. We are now entering the final phase of this story, the part where the consequences stop being theoretical and start showing up on your street, in your bank account, and in the faces of people you know personally. This is no longer about TikTok videos or angry tweets. This is about the next 10 years, and they are going to be the most disruptive decade any of us have ever lived through. Let us start with the year 2030, only 5 years from now. By 2030, the first wave of boomers who delayed retirement because they could not afford to stop working will be forced out anyway. Their bodies will give out. Their 401ks will be stretched to the breaking point, and the Social Security Trust Fund will officially hit zero. The government will still send checks, but they will be worth less every year because of inflation and because the money will have to come from somewhere. That somewhere is going to be massive tax increases on the remaining working population, which, thanks to collapsing birth rates, is shrinking every single year. Who is left holding the bag? The men who never married, never had kids, and never signed up for the old deal. They are the only ones with any surplus wealth because they never had to support wives, ex-wives, or children. The government already knows this. That is why you are going to see the rise of the bachelor tax, the childless penalty, the single male surcharge, whatever they end up calling it. They will dress it up as fairness. They will say these men use the roads and the schools and the system without paying their fair share. They will never say the quiet part out loud, that the system spent 50 years making sure these men had no incentive to participate in family formation. And now that the bill is due, the men who followed the rules the system gave them are going to be punished for it. And those men will laugh because by 2030, most of them will already be financially independent or damn close. They will have paid off houses in low tax states or in countries with zero capital gains tax. They will have 6 and 7-figure investment accounts that were built by never leaking money to dating, divorce, or daycare. They will have passports that let them leave the minute the tax man gets too aggressive. And when the government comes for their money, they will simply not be there to hand it over. That is the part nobody in power has gamed out yet. You cannot squeeze blood from a stone that has already left the country. By 2032, the housing crash that nobody is talking about right now will be in full swing. Not the 2008 kind where prices dropped because of bad loans. This one will be worse because it will be driven by lack of demand. The McMansions in the suburbs that were built for families of 4 will sit empty because there are no families of 4 forming anymore. The 3-bedroom starter homes will become 2-bedroom rentals, then 1-bedroom Airbnbs, then abandoned properties, because even investors will not be able to make the numbers work when the population is shrinking by 1 million people a year. Cities that bet everything on young professionals moving in will become ghost towers. Miami, Austin, Nashville, Denver, all the hot markets of the 2020s will have entire high-rise buildings sitting half empty because the men who used to move there to meet women stopped coming, and the women who did move there cannot afford the rent alone. You will see luxury apartments converted into co-living spaces, then into low-income housing, then into condemned buildings, all in less than 10 years. By 2033, the first major Western country will openly default on its pension obligations. It will probably be Italy or Spain. The headlines will scream about corruption and bad planning, but the truth will be simpler. There are not enough young people to pay for the old people, and the old people are starting to outnumber the young people 2-1. Riots will follow, governments will fall, and every other Western country will watch in horror, knowing they are only a few years behind. By 2035, the phrase economic conscription will enter the mainstream vocabulary. Governments that cannot afford to pay for their militaries with volunteers will bring back the draft, but with a twist. Only men, and only men who are single and childless. They will call it patriotic duty. They will say these men have no dependents, so they are the logical choice. And millions of men will simply refuse to show up. They will leave the country, go underground, or openly defy the orders because they no longer feel any loyalty to a society that spent their entire lives telling them they were disposable. That will be the moment the old social contract is officially declared dead. By 2037, entire industries that depended on male disposable income will be gone. High-end restaurants that used to survive on first dates and anniversary dinners will close. Jewelry stores will board up windows. Luxury car dealerships will pivot to fleet sales because individual buyers will disappear. The wedding industry, already down 50% from its peak, will collapse completely. Bridal magazines will cease printing. Wedding venues will become event spaces or storage units. The multi-billion-dollar baby industrial complex, strollers, cribs, diapers, formula, will shrink to a fraction of its former size. And through all of this, the men who walked away will be living better than any generation of men in recorded history. They will own small, efficient homes outright. They will drive paid off trucks or ride motorcycles they maintain themselves. They will eat high quality food they cook on grills in backyards that belong to them and only them. They will have bodies built in home gyms or local powerlifting clubs. They will have circles of brothers who would take a bullet for each other. They will travel to Thailand, Colombia, Portugal, Poland, places where people still smile at strangers and do not hate them for existing. They will wake up every single day owning their time, owning their peace, and owing nothing to anyone. And the women who spent the 2000s and 10s and 2000s and 20s telling men to get lost will be competing for a shrinking pool of government resources, a shrinking pool of high earning men who still believe in the old deal, and a growing pool of resentment from everyone else who realizes the party is over. That is the future that is already locked in. There is no policy fix. There is no speech that will bring men back. There is no amount of shaming, no new dating app, no government incentive, no cultural campaign that can undo 50 years of observable reality. The trust is gone. The contract is broken. The deal is off. And the men who figured it out first are not coming back to save anyone. They are too busy living the kind of lives previous generations of men could only dream about while they were working 60-hour weeks to pay for houses they barely lived in and children they barely saw. That is the final red pill. This was never about hating women. This was about loving themselves enough to stop hating themselves for existing. And once that switch flips, it does not flip back. So when you look around in 5 years and 10 years and you see the world changing in ways nobody prepared you for, remember this moment. Remember that it did not have to be this way. Remember that all of this could have been avoided with basic respect, basic reciprocity, and basic human decency. But it was not. And now the bill has come due. The men paid it in advance with their peace for decades. Now everyone else gets to pay it with everything else. And the men who walked away, they are already on the other side. Free. Finally. Completely. What did you think about all of this? Do you agree? Do you see it playing out in your own life or the lives of men you know? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Like the video, if it hit home, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss an upload. And if you appreciated this one, share it with every man who needs to hear it. And just remember, all roads lead to MWA. Men walking away. Cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.